With all of the news this past week, I got to be honest, I almost forgot that it was Talladega week. Had I not been going to the race already, I probably would have forgotten because this week's just been nuts. But it is Talladega week, and I want to look back at all of the amazing races that we've had over the years in the playoffs. Because this race has not only changed the outcome of drivers' seasons, but at times of drivers' careers due to championship implications. So today, let's look back at Talladega's greatest playoff moments. And of course, we're going to look over both the chase and the playoffs. So we're going to be doing all 16 races from 2004 to 2019. So we'll start out with 2004. This was the inaugural season of the chase, and you can tell looking back that the teams and drivers were just feeling it out at this point. They didn't know just exactly how to race this system yet. And with this, you see a lot of aggressive driving all day and drivers trying to stay up towards the front. It's actually kind of similar to what you see today with the playoff system. And two drivers in particular really had bad days, and it really screwed their chase over a lot. Jimmie Johnson, he had some engine issues, and right there, that put him further back. People don't remember, but Johnson actually had to mount a huge comeback towards the end of the 2004 season. And then you have Jeremy Mayfield. He was in a wreck, and it really basically ended his chase chances at that point. Up front, though, Dale Jr. would have this amazing comeback at the end of the race, coming from like 12th to 1st in the closing laps. And he dominated the day. He won the race. It was, I believe, his 5th Talladega win.
Looking for his 5th win at Talladega. Works his way back to the front. And Junior, where his father won 10 times. Oh, we got a car sideways in the trail. Number 5, the checker is out, and somebody upside down. Elliott Sadler. Again.
And Junior took the points lead after this race for a few days. Because after the race, Junior was interviewed, and he said this.
What does it mean to win here, not only once, but to win here 5 times?
Well, it don't mean shit right now. Daddy's done won here 10 times.
NASCAR docked him 25 points for this statement, and he lost the points lead to Kurt Busch. Now, the 2005 version of this race saw tons of wrecks. 2004 saw some smaller wrecks, but 2005 saw the big one. And not only once, but the big one struck twice. And it took out a lot of chasers. It truly lived up to the name of being the wild card of the chase. Now, at the end of the race, Tony Stewart was leading a lot during it. But he was upset, as were all of the chasers, by an unlikely winner.
Last lap. Oh, man. Here comes Tony Stewart. He's got the lead in turn 1. And Dale turned on the outside.
Unit 20, just the 2 of you. Neck to neck, come on.
Now it just depends on who goes with who. And how strong that 88 is, we're finally going to find out. Oh, crash. Kyle Petty. Hard crash. We stay green. Now the caution is out. Race is over.
Now, the 2006 running of this race was much different. The track had been repaved, and it was as smooth as the Old Spice guy. Also, this race really saw tons of great racing and the inception of tandem racing. Now, throughout the day, there were tons of leaders. There were people going to the front, to the back. The race was faster because of the repave, and there was a few wrecks. It took out a few chasers, but for the most part, a lot of them were in contention at the end of the race. At the end of the race, Dale Jr. was leading Jimmie Johnson and Brian Vickers. They had a train behind them. It was actually one of the first races I remember seeing train racing, and, well, this happened.
Vickers wants to go. Hey, getting a little wider.
There he goes.
Junior.
Down.
Oh, no! Vickers hits the 48.
Hook the 48 and takes out Earnhardt and Jimmie Johnson.
In 2007, the Fall Talladega race was the first race with the COT car at the plate races. So this race was really looked on a lot. And it was all right. There was some pack racing throughout the day, but at the same time, it wasn't all that great. There was a big one on lap 146 that did take out a few contenders. But at the end of the day, you had a lot of chasers still in the action up front. And on the last lap, Tony Stewart was up front, Jimmy Johnson was up front, and Jeff Gordon, one of the greatest plate drivers of all time, was up front looking to strike. Now, while there weren't tons of crashes throughout the day in 2007, that would not be the case for 2008. There was a lot of action and a lot of chasers being taken out from wrecks or mechanical failures. And at the end of the day, there was a huge wreck that took out the entire Roush fleet and the 88, all in the span of 10 seconds. But nobody remembers this. Why? Because it had one of the most controversial finishes in NASCAR history. And trust me, this won't be the last controversial finish on this video.
Have to do a lot of blocking right here. They've got to run on him. Got to run.
Here they come.
I can't go down there and do that, though.
Actually, I think it's legal on the last lap.
He might have got it right there. I think it's legal on the last lap.
They are saying Tony Stewart has won the race. Tony Stewart is the official winner here at Talladega. They would not allow that pass below the yellow line.
The 2009 running of this race, actually, in my opinion, other than like the last 20 laps or so, is one of the most boring. Why? Because of what happened in the spring. In the spring, Brad Keselowski and Carl Edwards were coming down to the finish. Then, Keselowski went low, Edwards went to block, and Edwards flew in the fence. Now, the reason these two guys were so close is because of the tandem draft and bump drafting throughout the day. Well, NASCAR didn't want to have another issue like the Carl Edwards issue and possibly injure fans, so what they decided to do was ban bump drafting in much of the day. Now, you can tell that it didn't really ban much when you look at the replays, but drivers decided to take it easy, and with that, they almost kind of protested NASCAR a bit by just train racing most of the day. But it led to a hectic finish because no one really wrecked out of the race that was of importance. And that then led to tons of desperate drivers at the end of the day with a nearly full field trying to make it towards the front. There were flips like the one Ryan Newman had, but the biggest one came in the final restart of the race. 2010 saw a lot of wrecks with favorites and some with chasers. This was a good race for the most part because it was a hybrid between the pack racing that we saw in the mid and early 2000s as well as tandem racing that was starting to become more prevalent. This was seen in 2010 at the Aaron's 499, but it also was seen in this race. 2011 was a much different beast for one, or maybe if you want to say two, different reasons. And what it is tandem drafting was everywhere. It was the most prevalent form of drafting in both Daytona races and the first Talladega race. NASCAR was trying to get rid of it through different rules changes with the restrictor plate, but it came to no avail. So throughout the day, drivers would team up and try and draft with each other either to stay safe out of wrecks or to just go to the lead. No one could stay anywhere throughout the day, really, though. There were small wrecks throughout the day, and there was one that took out some chasers, but for the most part, most of the drivers towards the end of the day were still running. There was a huge pack at the end of the race, but drivers would pull away, and there was an upset winner again for the chasers, and a pretty close finish. 2012 saw a bit of a return to form for this race. Back were the packs, because NASCAR forced it to be that way with rules changes. You could tandem draft, but you would overheat really quick, and most of the people would catch back up to you. So it led to pack racing with some tandem drafting sprinkled in. There was a crazy-ass finish at the end of this race, and there was a big-ass wreck. 2013 saw the start of the Gen 6 era. The era that we're actually currently about to end next year. So with this, pack racing would change. And it changed in this race to be really reminiscent of the early 2000s. It wasn't as good by any means, but it was still really good. There was a lot of 2 and 3 wide racing throughout the day, a lot of people going to and from the back and front of the pack, but it was dominated still by the 48, the 88, and the 20. It was a relatively clean race. There weren't really many wrecks or anything other than just one wreck. Though it isn't remembered for this. Many people actually hate the finish of this race. 1, because of the train racing, and 2, well, because it ended too early. 2014 was the first year of the elimination playoff / chase, whatever you want to call it, era. And this really made Talladega a spot of desperation because this race was a cutoff race at this time. It ended the hopes of the 88, 18, 48, and 5, so it was a pretty bad day for Hendrick and Kyle Busch, but it had a crazy finish that was really, really good, and in my opinion, an instant classic.
Newman leads at that line. Who leads at the next one? But you got to get back to the front because a caution could happen and you could be out of luck. Keselowski really doesn't have the help that he's going to need to win this race. And he must win it. But he's in good shape now because Newman has no push. Here comes Landon Castle behind Matt Kenseth, behind Brad Keselowski. But watch Kenseth, he can still make a move. Landon Castle to the outside, tri-oval, sprint to the checkered flag. Who wins? Brad Keselowski wins it at Talladega.
The opening 183 laps of the 2015 Talladega race was a really good race. It saw a lot of drivers being up front who were trying to get themselves to move forward in the playoffs, but at the same time, it saw a lot of clean racing for the most part. There were actually no major wrecks in the opening 100-something laps, and there was actually a lot of green flag racing too. There was desperation from Matt Kenseth and Dale Jr., and the latter of the two would actually dominate much of the early part of the race, have issues, and then come back up towards the front and contend for the win. But nobody remembers all of these great things. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Nobody remembers a lot of the parts of Talladega because of finishes. And this finish was one of the most controversial and ugliest finishes in NASCAR history due to the implications and due to just how badly it was handled.
Green flag back in the air. The four not going. They wreck behind him. The green flag is out as they cross the start-finish line. Will they throw the caution? Trying to get back up to speed. Caution comes out. Now the question is, who was in front? From NASCAR, they are telling us that the 22 was in front, and so Joey Logano will sweep round 2.
2016 saw engine issues actually be put on full display, and it took out Truex and Brad Keselowski. JGR drivers holding back in this race actually, in my opinion, was one of the big catalysts for stage racing being put into place. Basically, what happened is a lot of these drivers who were up front in the chase or playoff standings would hang back at Talladega, let everyone wreck, and basically just take it easy for the first 70% of the race. So, they had no incentive whatsoever to go to the front. So, what NASCAR, I think, did because of this race and some like it is put stage racing in to try and make drivers race their way towards the front throughout the day. Up front, though, Joey Logano would score the victory. The 2017 run in this race was a big one because it was filled with big ones. The final restart of this race had like 7 or 8 cars running for the win. I mean, that's just insane. It's kind of like this past year's Clash. This also was big because this was the last Talladega race for Dale Earnhardt Jr., one of the greatest Talladega racers ever. And there's a lot of hype for him in Earnhardt Nation. But he would not be able to close out the deal because Brad Keselowski would get the win, and it would be the 4th straight victory for Penske in the fall race. You know, most of the fall Talladega races I've talked about, especially in the Gen 6 era, have seemed pretty interesting, right? Well, this is where that trend gets bucked. Because this race was boring for the most part. SHR dominated. They just pulled away every time. All 4 cars just pulled right away. I'm not saying they're cheating. It's something that's normal at Talladega. Teams just hit it right a lot of times. DEI and Hendrick did this for a long time. Roush has done it. JGR has done it. This race, SHR got it. There were some wrecks in this race that took out some contenders, but for the most part, it was pretty boring. Though, Aric Almirola getting his first win, well, that was pretty nice to see. In 2019, the race was delayed a day by rain. So, everybody had an extra night to stew on everything that was about to happen. And holy crashes, Batman. This race had tons of crashes in it. And the biggest one everyone remembers is the one where Brendan Gaughan takes the lead for a split second and then flips over the pack. It was a great race, though. The package, like I said, has been hit correctly. And it really got hit correctly on this race. It was one of the best races in years. But the finish was amazing, too. It really added into this. And Ryan Blaney would be the 6th straight Ford to win in this race. And this win was the 5th of the last 6 fall Talladega races for Penske. And with that, we're caught up to the modern day, 2020. And now I want to leave it to you. What do you think is going to happen in this race? Leave a comment down below. And while you're at it, leave a like in this video and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. And until next time, have a good one.